Too pretty to promote. I still remember the exact moment he said it. Not behind closed doors, not in a private meeting, not even in a lowered voice. No, he stood in the middle of the conference room, a place filled with suited executives, senior developers, and department heads, and said, "She's a distraction. You can't promote someone who looks like that." Nobody would focus. I felt my heart stop. I wasn't even in the room when it happened. Olivia from HR told me later that day. Whispered it, actually, like it was a warning, like she was doing me a favor. "She's a distraction." That was my legacy at Riverside Technologies. Not my degree, not my work ethic, not the fact that I worked 70 hours a week without complaint, not the international client I personally landed, or the operations manual I built from scratch when no one else knew what the hell they were doing. Just a distraction, because I dared to wear mascara and not apologize for it, because I wore heels and carried myself like I was worth something, because I said thank you instead of I'm sorry. They couldn't stand it, especially him, Ethan Rowe, the man who'd hired me straight out of college as his executive assistant. The man who promised, "Stick with me, Madison, and I'll make sure you rise with me." What a joke. He rose. I didn't. And I let it slide for a while. 4 years of slide. 4 years of watching men with half my ability leapfrog over me into positions they didn't even know how to handle. 4 years of bringing Ethan coffee while he ignored my proposals. 4 years of helping him prep for board meetings I wasn't allowed to attend, while my ideas were quietly handed off to someone else. But I took notes every single day. What he said, what he did, the off-the-record conversations, the harmless jokes, the funding numbers, the client kickbacks, the HR complaints he buried, and the women who left in silence. I wasn't one of them. I made sure of it. I wasn't going to walk away in defeat. I wasn't going to cry in the parking lot. I wasn't going to apply somewhere else and start over. No. I was going to rise. Not with him above him. And it all started the day I stopped taking notes for Ethan and started taking notes on Ethan, because Ethan Rowe had no idea that his distraction was about to become his destruction. A chair at the table. I built the damn table. For most people, revenge is loud. Mine was silent. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I didn't post a rage-fueled breakdown on social media or tell anyone to just wait and see. I just started listening, really listening. When Ethan vented about investors over lunch, I was there, filing every name and complaint in my personal notebook. When legal asked him for compliance docs he claimed were lost, I started quietly printing backup copies for myself. When he joked about hiring only the hot ones for marketing, I made sure those Slack messages were screen-capped and exported time-stamped. My face never changed. My voice never rose. And that's what saved me. Because men like Ethan, arrogant men, never suspect the quiet ones. Especially if they're women. Especially if they smile when spoken to. And that made me dangerous. He thought I was still his obedient assistant. But I was building a war chest. Information, evidence, patterns, and most importantly leverage, because while Ethan was busy patting himself on the back for landing a Series C investor, I was taking note of which accounts were being funneled through shell companies while he was drinking whiskey in his glass office and joking about boys' club promotions. I was calculating the churn rate of his sales hires and comparing it against HR attrition logs, and while he was buying time, I was buying shares. Yes, shares. I didn't need a seat at his table. I was building my own board. See, Ethan forgot something important. The company wasn't his. It never was. It belonged to shareholders. And over time, slowly, silently, I became one. It first. It was small, a single-digit percentage gifted to employees through phantom equity. But the market was volatile, and a few of the original partners were spooked. One of them, a woman named Serena, was tired of Ethan's bro culture and cashed out quietly. She didn't know what I was planning, she just wanted out. I bought her shares. Another partner moved abroad. I bought his too. And by year 5, I held 28% of Riverside Technologies, just under the 30% needed to call a shareholder meeting. So I waited. I waited through fake smiles, through boardroom lies, through one more promotion that should have been mine but went to some guy who called me sweetheart in the elevator, and when the timing was perfect, when Ethan was preparing to pitch to new investors, expand into international markets, and needed a flawless public image, I called the meeting. His face turned pale when he saw the calendar invite. Emergency shareholder assembly initiated by Madison Rivera. I wasn't just a distraction anymore. I was his equal. And soon, I'd be his superior. Emergency meeting. Ethan didn't show up to the meeting on time. He always strutted into rooms like he owned the oxygen. But that day, he was 8 minutes late. And when he finally walked in, his tie was crooked and his face was pale. He scanned the room, the same conference room where he once called me a distraction, and paused when he saw me at the head of the table, not beside it, not next to his chair. The head. Madison, he said, too casually. What's this about? I didn't smile. I didn't stand. I tapped the gavel once, firm and slow. This is a formal emergency shareholder assembly, I said, regarding leadership, conduct, equity mismanagement, and violations of internal compliance policy. The silence in the room was electric. You could feel the oxygen thinning. To his left, Serena's old seat was now occupied by Raymond, one of the original partners who now backed me. To his right, Miriam from HR stared at him like she already knew what was coming. He tried to laugh. You've got to be kidding me. No, I said, flipping open the binder in front of me. But you might want to take a look at Exhibit A before continuing. I slid it across the table, a 47-page document detailing a series of suppressed HR complaints, expense reports that didn't match corporate records, and internal emails discussing unapproved bonus payouts. At first, he didn't touch it. Then he reached for it with shaking fingers. This is cherry-picked, he muttered. It's time-stamped, Ethan, I replied, with screenshots, logged IPs, employee testimonies. This is insane, he said, raising his voice. You're just bitter I didn't promote you. That was it. That one sentence was his nail in the coffin. Because all eyes turned to me. Not with pity, not with confusion, with recognition. I didn't come here to get even, I said, steady and cold. I came here to restore accountability to a company you've been draining for years. Then I turned to the board members. I'm submitting a formal motion for the immediate suspension of Ethan Rowe pending full investigation. As acting shareholder representative, I recommend interim leadership be transferred to myself. Gasps. Then silence. Then a slow, deliberate nod from Raymond. I second the motion, he said. Ethan stood. You can't do this. You don't have the votes. Then came the coldest line of the morning from Miriam. She does, Ethan. We checked. His mouth opened, closed, and for the first time in his career, Ethan Rowe had nothing to say. Just rage. Powerless, bitter rage. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I simply said, meeting adjourned. And as I stood, every eye followed me. The same eyes that once looked through me. This wasn't just a power shift. It was the start of a new order. And I was the one holding the pen. The little girl WHO didn't fit the mold. I didn't grow up wanting power. I grew up wanting peace. A quiet house. A fair chance. A voice that didn't get talked over. But life has a way of training you young. And in my family, being the smart, quiet girl meant two things. You were useful, and you were forgettable. My brother, Leo, was the golden child, loud, athletic, charming. My mother used to say, Leo's got fire. Madison has order. She said it like it was a flaw. Like order was boring. Like predictability and patience were signs of weakness. Even as a kid, I noticed things like how Leo got praised for average grades, while my A's were expected. Like how I was told to let him talk at the dinner table because boys need to be heard. So I stopped trying to be heard. I started listening instead. I learned how to read a room before entering it. How to lower my tone so others leaned in. How to ask the right questions and let people underestimate me, because when they did, they told me everything. By the time I was 16, I'd already been passed over for enough things: school, leadership, scholarships, internship offers, to know one truth. The world does not reward quiet girls. It uses them, then forgets them. But I made a promise to myself that year. I wrote it down in a journal and underlined it twice. They will never forget me again. I didn't know how I'd do it yet. I didn't even have a plan, but I knew I would never sit in a room and feel invisible again. So I built myself slowly, not just in grades or degrees, but in silence, in observation, in restraint. And when I entered the corporate world, I already knew what I was walking into. I recognized the Ethan Rose before they opened their mouths, and I smiled, because they never recognized me back. Not until it was too late. The public war, it didn't take long for him to go dirty. Within 48 hours of the shareholder meeting, a leaked memo started circulating in tech industry gossip blogs. It claimed I had weaponized personal grievances, pressured board members into votes, and manipulated internal politics for personal gain. No signature, no source, but the language reeked of Ethan. He couldn't win in the boardroom, so he took it public: the oldest trick in the book: turn a woman's ambition into toxicity, turn her leadership into hysteria, turn her competence into manipulation. It worked faster than I expected. Recruiters ghosted me. Old colleagues started sending awkward "hey, just checking in" messages. Even Serena, who had sold me her shares, texted, "Was this your plan all along?" No one asked what Ethan had done. They just assumed I had gone too far. I should have been prepared, but I wasn't. I spent years calculating numbers, building cases, studying contracts, but nothing prepares you for anonymous slander wearing a suit of fake professionalism. That weekend, I stayed off social media. I deleted the news apps from my phone. I sat in my tiny kitchen, lights off, drinking cold coffee at a.m., wondering if I had made a mistake. Not in exposing him, that was never the mistake. The mistake was thinking people would want the truth more than they wanted comfort. Ethan had been their comfort. Loud, confident, familiar. I was their discomfort. Quiet, sharp, unapologetic. I was the warning that their rules weren't working anymore, and that terrified them more than his lies ever could. But I didn't break, because I remembered something my grandmother once told me. Back when I was just a little girl sitting on her lap, when you make them uncomfortable, it means they were too comfortable in the wrong thing. So I got back up. I called an emergency press meeting this time, with legal counsel and HR documentation in hand. No emotion, no tears, just numbers, screenshots, audio files, testimonies. I spoke for exactly 12 minutes. And when I was done, I looked directly into the camera and said, "I didn't burn this house down. I rebuilt it, with a foundation that won't crumble under misogyny." The next day, the gossip blogs went silent. By Friday, Riverside Technologies stock had risen 4. Ethan had started a war, but I was ending it on record. The ones WHO stayed removing Ethan from power was like cutting off a snake's head, but I quickly learned something worse. The tail still moves for a while. He was gone, suspended, stripped of decision-making authority, locked out of his accounts. But the ones who laughed at his jokes, the ones who mimicked his tone, the ones who nodded every time he made a sexist comment, they were still here, and they were angry. Not because Ethan was innocent, but because I wasn't supposed to win. They had seen women rise before, always by being agreeable, soft-spoken, eager to please. Not like me, not surgical, not silent, not strategic. I wasn't the kind of woman they could mold. I was the kind they feared. So they resisted. They questioned every decision I made. "Are you sure that's the right vendor? We've always used Greg for that." They undermined meetings, delayed approvals, forgot calendar invites. They made jokes just loud enough for me to hear, but quiet enough that I'd look paranoid if I reacted. They called it growing pains. I called it sabotage. I wasn't naive. I didn't expect applause, but I expected professionalism. And when that failed, I changed strategy. No more nice CEO. I started documenting everything again, every delay, every miscommunication, Every email where they CC'd me last or forgot I was leading the project. Then I called for individual performance reviews, something Ethan hadn't done in 3 years. Within 2 weeks, 5 of his loyalists either quit or were quietly demoted. The rest, they got the message, but the moment that defined everything came during a Monday morning town hall. A junior analyst fresh out of college, maybe 23, stood up and asked, "What would you say to young women who are afraid to speak up in toxic workplaces?" I paused. I looked around at the room. So many faces I used to avoid eye contact with. So many eyes that once rolled when I spoke. And then I answered, "You don't need to be louder, just sharper. Take notes, save proof, and when the time comes, don't ask for a seat at the table. Flip the damn table and build your own." The room went quiet. Then the clapping started. Not from the executives, from the interns, from the juniors, from the ones who had always watched from the shadows just like I once did. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't fighting for me anymore. I was building a new blueprint. Their last weapon, my past, they couldn't destroy me from the inside. So they went after the outside. It started with small things: a sudden request for my high school transcripts in a press interview, a question about my ex from a podcast host I'd never spoken to. Then it escalated. One morning, I opened my inbox to find a screenshot of a tweet old from years ago, before I ever joined Riverside. It was me, quoting a rap lyric about burning bridges. Someone had captioned it, "This is your CEO." It had been retweeted over 1,000 times. By the afternoon, a gossip account posted a photo of me from a college party, red cup in hand, messy curls, eyeliner smeared. Madison Rivera, CEO or chaos. The headline read, I knew exactly where it came from. Ethan couldn't win in the boardroom, couldn't beat me in the press. So now, he was trying to beat me in the mirror. They dug through every trace of my past: exes, friends, professors, roommates. And when they couldn't find a scandal, they manufactured shame, because the world doesn't need you to do something wrong. It just needs to feel uncomfortable with the fact that you're not apologizing for existing. I wanted to retreat. I almost did. There were nights I stared at my ceiling at a.m., wondering if I should just resign. Go away quietly. Let the company survive without the headlines. But then, I remembered my mother. Not her words, her silence, the way she folded her hands and lowered her eyes every time my father spoke over her. The way she smiled through birthdays and betrayals alike. The way she told me, "Pick your battles." And I whispered, out loud to no one, "I already did." So I didn't run. I responded. I made a post. No PR team, no lawyer filtered language. Just me. A picture of myself from that same party photo, now captioned, "Yes, that's me." The same woman who built a company while others tried to tear her down. You don't erase a woman's legacy by showing she has one. It went viral. Not in a messy way, in a righteous way. Thousands of women commented, "I needed this. Thank you. Following you forever." And for the first time, I realized I wasn't alone anymore. The same shame they tried to use against me, it became my proof. Proof that I had lived, fought, survived. And I was still standing. Money talks, but so do receipts. The email came at 6:17 a.m. I was still in bed, half asleep, my hand searching for the snooze button when my phone buzzed again. Then again, 3 emails, all with the same subject line. Urgent. Investor concerns about leadership stability. I sat up instantly. Inside were cold, sharp sentences, emotionless, corporate, coded. Some of our limited partners have expressed hesitation regarding ongoing media attention. We're receiving inquiries about a leadership restructure for long-term stability. Perhaps a temporary advisory role would ease boardroom tension. Translation: we want to push you out quietly. I knew the language. Ethan didn't need a board seat anymore. He had influence. His friends in suits, in golf courses, in investor groups that didn't care about screenshots or ethics, just numbers and comfort. I wasn't the comfortable choice, and they were using that But what they didn't know was I'd been expecting this months ago. I had started recording all investor communication through official channels. Every meeting, every promise, every performance chart. I had data, not just passion, not just morality, evidence. That same day, I called for an investor transparency assembly, a right I had. Thanks to Clause 3.4.6 in the shareholder agreement, they thought I didn't read the fine print. I wrote it. The meeting was virtual, dozens of names, black Zoom boxes, a few cameras on, most silent. I shared my screen. Presented Riverside's quarterly growth under my leadership, 6.2% net revenue, 9.1% retention among female hires, 0 compliance violations, and then I dropped the bomb. A side-by-side comparison. Ethan's last 6 months as CEO vs. my first 6 months. Red, then green, decline, then rise. No emotion, no commentary, just charts. I paused, let the silence stretch. Then I said, if this company wants to align with investors who value misogyny over metrics, you're free to leave. But I will not step aside for doing what male CEOs are applauded for every single day. Click. Meeting ended. By Monday, 5 of the largest investors issued public statements supporting my leadership. 3 who opposed. They quietly sold. Guess who bought a portion of their shares? Me. And for the first time since this war began, I held 33. More than Ethan ever had. They used money to try and scare me. But money doesn't scare women who came from nothing and built everything with receipts. Betrayal doesn't always wear a suit. His name was Callum. We met during my 2nd year at Riverside. Before the war. Before I knew how much power could rot a person from the inside. He worked in finance, clean suits, clean smiles, clever, charm. He called me Mads in that lazy, warm way only someone close to you can. He made me feel seen, and for a while, that was enough. We dated quietly, no drama, no office gossip. I thought I had finally found something outside the storm, until he started asking questions. Subtle at first. Why don't you tell me more about the shareholder structure? Do you really trust Serena? Is Ethan really that bad? Or is it personal? I didn't think much of it then. Just curiosity. Until one night, I saw a flash of a name on his phone, Ethan, and then another, and another. The texts were long, cold, businesslike. He was feeding Ethan information about me, about my moves, about my plans. I confronted him. He didn't deny it. Ethan offered me a future, he said. You were too busy trying to destroy one. My mouth went dry. He wasn't just a traitor. He was a mirror. He made me question myself. Was I destroying? Was I cold? Had I become exactly what I swore to fight? For weeks, I couldn't sleep. I walked into boardrooms with my chin up. But inside, everything shook. Because betrayal doesn't always come from enemies. Sometimes it comes from the one who said your name like a promise. I didn't tell anyone. Not because I was ashamed. Because I didn't want to be the angry woman with personal baggage at the top. But that silence had weight. So I did what I always did. I turned pain into preparation. I cleared my digital presence, updated my security protocols, hired a private firm to sweep my office for data leaks, and I started building again this time. Alone. No distractions, no emotional dependencies, just strategy. People say loneliness is the price of power. But I think loneliness is the tax of betrayal. And I paid it in full. The crown gets heavy. Success came quickly. Too quickly. Riverside was growing. The numbers were clean. Investor calls were shorter and friendlier. Our hiring metrics were up. Employee turnover down. Even the media had shifted tone from scandal to strategy. But inside the office, the air felt colder. Not hostile, just distant. Meetings were quieter. People stopped dropping by my office like they used to. My leadership, once seen as bold and necessary, now whispered as aggressive. It started small, a manager asking if his team could have more creative freedom, another suggesting we bring back some of the old culture to boost morale. One exec even said, maybe we've overcorrected too far. Ethan wasn't all bad. I wanted to scream. Not because they missed Ethan, but because they missed the comfort he represented. He didn't challenge them. He let them joke, slip, slide, and skate. I held them accountable, and suddenly, I was too much. I called a meeting with Raymond, one of the board members who supported me from the start. Am I losing them? I asked. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "You're not losing them, Madison. You're leading them somewhere they've never been. That scares people. Should I ease up?" He looked at me firm. "No, but maybe. Let them in on the plan. People follow better when they understand where they're going." That night, I sat alone in the office. No noise, no calls. Just my reflection in the glass wall, looking tired and powerful and human. He was right. I had climbed so high I forgot to build stairs behind me. I had silenced the chaos, but I hadn't invited anyone into the quiet. So the next morning, I did something unexpected. I brought the team into the executive lounge. No formal table, no slides, no agenda. I told them the truth, that I didn't want control. I wanted transformation, that I didn't rise to power to punish, but to protect, that I had learned from Ethan not how to lead, but how not to lead. And then I asked them, "What kind of company do you want to build with me?" There was silence. Then, a voice from the back, a young developer I barely knew, one where our daughters wouldn't be scared to speak in a meeting. That was it. The wall cracked. The distance dissolved, because power isn't just what you hold, it's what you share. The last storm, it started with a podcast, a low-budget, semi-popular tech bro show called The Founder's Code. The host opened with, "Tonight's guest is a former executive who says he was silenced by the woman who hijacked Riverside Technologies." Hijacked, not rebuilt, not rescued. Hijacked, and there he was, Ethan Rowe. Looking polished, patient, rehearsed. He didn't name me directly, of course. He was above that. He used phrases like emotional instability, culture of fear, and hostile restructuring. He called himself a casualty of cancel culture and an advocate for healthy masculinity in leadership. The comments exploded. The algorithm went wild. Within 24 hours, 3 more podcasts picked it up. Former Riverside employees, the ones I had quietly demoted for harassment or incompetence, crawled out of the woodwork. They all had stories now. Stories about how hard it was to work under a woman with an agenda. About how I rose too fast. About how I played the victim to gain control. It wasn't just gossip. It was war. Shareholders started emailing again. Investors scheduled urgent check-ins. A tech media outlet published a front-page piece titled, "Is Madison Rivera leading with vision or vengeance?" My team panicked. PR drafted statements. Legal advised silence. Even Raymond warned, this could undo everything. I said no. And no more silence. No more strategic calm. No more hoping the truth would rise on its own. This time I'd speak, not to defend, but to declare. I called a press conference. I stood at the podium alone. No lawyer, no assistant, no filters. And I said, I didn't hijack a company. I saved it. From the rot you were too comfortable to acknowledge. From the culture you laughed about in private. From the silence you sold as professionalism. They call me aggressive. But what's more aggressive than a system that silences women unless they behave like ghosts? You want receipts? I brought them. Financials, growth reports, exit interviews, and a waiting list of talent lining up to work for a place that finally listens. I paused, then looked into the camera. I am not your perfect CEO, but I am the one you needed, and you'll remember me long after the men you protected are forgotten. Silence. Then applause. Not from everyone, but from enough to hold the line. Enough to make the board hold steady. Enough to make advertisers stay. Enough to remind the world I didn't come to play fair. I came to win clean. The woman in the glass. It had been 3 years since Ethan Rowe last stepped foot in the building. No one talked about him anymore. Not in meetings, not in interviews, not even in whispers. He had become what he always feared most, irrelevant. But me, I was still here. Not in headlines, not always in the boardroom, but in every hallway, every policy, Every woman who walked through these doors without lowering her voice, they didn't need to know the war I fought to enjoy the peace I left behind, and that was enough. One afternoon, I passed by the lobby mirror, the same one I once glanced at nervously on my first day, checking my lipstick, adjusting my blouse, wondering if I looked too much. Now I stopped, stared. The woman in the glass didn't flinch anymore, didn't shrink, didn't explain. She didn't need to. She had survived. She had built something no one could take from her, and she had done it not by being louder but by being undeniable. So if you're watching this, if you've ever been called too much or not enough, if you've ever swallowed your voice just to be allowed in the room, then this isn't just my story. It's your blueprint. I was Madison Rivera, guest in my own company, stranger in my own power, until I took it all back. Now I've told my story. What's yours? Drop it in the comments. Hit like if you've ever been underestimated. Subscribe for more real stories of revenge, power, and justice. Because next time, you might be the guest on this channel, and we're listening.